When I first started playing Granblue Fantasy Versus, the last thing I expected was that my main was going to be this character. But from the moment she graced my television screen, she was reserved a special place in my heart. I picked up the game on a whim and didn't expect much, if I'm honest. From what I had seen, it looked like a generic anime-style fighting game title, and as I am a Soul Calibur diehard, forever awaiting another title in futile, I was hoping that maybe, just maybe, this could fill the Soul Calibur shaped void within me. However, I quickly began to see that not only was the lore and world of Granblue rather unique, the characters were diverse and fascinating. Did it fill the Soul Calibur void? Nah, bro. Only another Soul Calibur could do that. But it did fill the void that I had shaped specifically for Ladiva that I didn't even know I possessed. That's her name, by the way, Ladiva. Or, in Japanese, fastiva, which kind of sounds like fast diva, which I kind of live for. She is a Draf, a fantasy race exclusive to the Granblue universe. They're a cow/bull humanoid species notable for their very large and burly males and short busty females. But Ladiva is a trans woman and thus does not fit the archetype of other Drafts of her gender. She is large, muscular, and even bearded. She's also an icon, she is a legend, and she is the moment.
She's got a point, she's an icon, she's a legend, and she is the moment. Now come on now.
In Granblue Fantasy Versus, she is the star duelist of the Jewel Resort casino liner, capturing the hearts of anyone and everyone who comes to see her perform. She is devoted to her fans and aims to return the love they give her with the best performances possible. And when she isn't absolutely killing it at her wrestling gig, she is a part of the airship crew of main characters that are out there saving the world from whatever current threat is looming over the sky realm. But why though, I hear you ask? Where does my deep love for this character come from? Thank you for asking. I am so ready to rant at you about it for the next however many minutes it takes. Let's start with her gender. Ladiva, despite being a trans woman confident in her identity, is proudly gender non-conforming. She isn't dysphoric about her appearance, her height, her beard, or her muscles. In fact, she is at one point offered an alchemical transition from masculine to feminine from Cagliostro, an incredibly powerful master alchemist, a genius at her craft. And no, you can never get me to pronounce it like Cagliostro like they do in the game, like go away. Impressed by Ladiva's heroism, she makes this offer as a gift for her valor and compassion, and Ladiva politely refuses. The exchange goes like this. By the way, do you ever feel like you want to be something else? Well, this is coming out of nowhere. I can change a lot with my alchemy, you know, like a child into an adult, or the masculine into the feminine. If you want, I could theoretically make that happen for you too. But it's just supposition. You don't have to. That sounds great, but I have to refuse. Because my parents gave me this body. It's my treasure. Ladiva gives Cagliostro a smile, who returns the expression without realizing it. There's a little more to the scene, but Ladiva and Cagliostro basically become besties despite their very apparent differences. Because at their core, the two of them have a lot in common despite appearances. Ladiva is proud of being built the way that she is because she sees the body she was born in as a gift. Her brawn allowing her more strength and power to defend the ones she loves in a way that works for her. She wasn't gifted with any magic, as most Draf aren't, or any other special ability like others in the cast. But she has her big muscles and her big heart, and that's all she needs. They also make it pretty clear that being quote-unquote masculine doesn't mean you're stronger. A large number of the strongest characters are strong women. But for Ladiva, this is the strength she was gifted with, and she aims to make the best of it. There's kind of a running cultural narrative when we usually talk about transness, where we stress that trans people are born in the wrong body. And Ladiva challenges this limiting narrative. While some trans people do prefer this language, others find it to be an oversimplification or a palatable way to explain trans identities to cisgender people. But Ladiva shows that she can unapologetically be a woman whilst also practicing radical self-love and total acceptance of who she is and the body she inhabits. trans. Some players are convinced that she is a drag queen who embodies a female persona while wrestling, but that actually isn't the case. Her gender is listed on every official source I could find as female, and she and other characters refer to her as a woman, exclusively using she/her pronouns for her, even when she's off stage and not performing. The way she presents in and out of wrestling is the same, and according to fans, she's often pictured in the official art depicting all of the women in the cast. I think part of why some of the fanbase have a hard time seeing her as a woman or as trans is because of transmedicalism, the idea that being transgender is primarily a medical issue related to gender dysphoria. Many transmedicalists believe individuals who identify as transgender without experiencing gender dysphoria or desiring to undergo a medical transition through methods such as hormone replacement therapy or sex reassignment surgery are not genuinely transgender. Transmedicalism is typically the default view of transgender issues for a lot of people. It's easier for people to swallow the idea of someone feeling wrong in themselves and needing medical intervention to feel right than it is for people to accept that gender is a social construct and that some people just know themselves to be a different gender than the one they were assigned at birth by society. Those who disagree with transmedicalism as a concept often compare it to the medical model of disability in that it medicalizes an attribute that contains both medical and social components. It also defines trans people solely by their struggles rather than their identity, and contextualizes transness by pain and not by joy, or even any other aspect of being trans. And it gatekeeps language from people that it could be incredibly helpful for to give them a better vernacular to describe their experiences. There's an essay collection curated by author Laura Kate Dale titled Gender Euphoria. She's an author, a full-time video game critic, and podcaster as well as a trans woman. She curated and edited this collection for this specific reason. She was seeing countless media representations, whether positive or negative, fiction or non-fiction, that were driven by trans discomfort and hurt. She even says that she fell into this trap a bit when she told the story of her own transition. When creating Gender Euphoria as a title, she wanted to explore the other side and share the stories of people all over who were experiencing trans joy. And in response to those who feel gender dysphoria is necessary for being trans, she said the following, quote, "When I said earlier that gender dysphoria isn't a required part of being trans, I meant it. When I say that, sometimes people ask me how someone would know they were trans if not for feeling uncomfortable with their body and the way they were born. And to that, I say the answer is simple. If you try presenting yourself as something other than your birth-assigned gender and it makes you feel euphoric, that's just as valid a reason to claim your identity as escaping dysphoria. Gender euphoria is an equally valid reason to decide who you are." End quote. The truth is, not all trans people medically transition or even want to in the first place. And some who want to are barred from procedures because of a lack of funds or lack of health. If surgery is required to be transgender, then this presents a clear case of classism, where only those with enough money have the right to claim their identity. And a clear case of ableism, where only healthy people who are viable for surgical procedures can live in their transness. There are actually multiple ways to transition, the two biggest being a medical transition and a social transition. A medical transition is when someone makes use of medical assistance such as hormone replacement therapy or surgical procedures to align their inner vision of themselves with their outer. This is usually done to alleviate gender dysphoria, but for some people it's just something they desire to feel more comfortable in their skin. Similar to the way any cisgender person can get skincare procedures or cosmetic surgery without there being an aspect of struggle behind their decision. A social transition, though, that is the way that Ladiva has transitioned, and guess what? It's completely valid. In fact, most people who medically transition often transition socially first. So, what is social transitioning exactly? It's when someone comes out of the closet to their friends and family, or asks others to refer to them using specific pronouns that feel right for them. It can include changing your name, maybe even changing the way you dress or use your voice. The only real requirement there is to being trans is that you know yourself to be a different gender than the one you were assigned at birth. Which brings me to my next point. Another aspect of her character that I love is her gender presentation. All too often, when we talk about transness, we confuse gender identity with gender presentation. Gender identity is who you know yourself to be, while gender presentation is how we tailor our appearance and behave in relation to societal gender norms. While the ways we present to the world can be a great way to signal who we are and how we relate to others around us, it isn't the be-all end-all of the trans experience, or any experience for that matter. People expect trans femmes to serve hyperfemininity and for trans masks to serve macho. But there are plenty of trans women who rock a shaved head, or trans men who love how they look in eyeliner and a skirt. Hell, I've even seen cisgender women grow beards because of conditions like PCOS and love that for themselves. And cisgender men who love wearing glamorous makeup. A great example of someone who doesn't necessarily fit society's norms of her gender is bodybuilder, activist, and personal trainer Janae Marie Kroc. Janae, despite having full confidence in her identity as a gender-fluid trans woman, grew up obsessed with bodybuilding and strength. She decided to keep it up, even after medically transitioning. If you're interested in her and her story, there's a wonderful documentary about her called Transformer, following her journey into owning her transness. And she has a YouTube channel as well. I will link it in the description box with the rest of my sources. I love that Ladiva dresses in her own unique style, a cross between wrestler garb, but with much more typically feminine attributes. She highlights her features in ways that are flattering to her shape, regardless of whether or not society views said features as feminine or masculine. Beard, manicured to fit her face. Hair, long and luscious. Cleavage that highlights her glorious pecs, high heels, heart motifs, lace-up chaps with exposed thighs. She can turn out any look, and she knows it. Most of Ladiva's hobbies and interests encompass a range of things typically viewed by society as feminine. She loves cooking and baking, knitting, cute things, and is fond of children. But similar to Janae, right up there as one of her favorite pastimes is working out. And why not? There are bodybuilders of all genders, shapes, and sizes anyway. Questing after those sweet gains is a pastime shared by many. I think it's very likely that Ladiva found herself aligning with femininity in her culture at home because she fit in with the girls and shared all their hobbies. Taking a woman's place in society quite possibly always felt right for her. I like that as a character, she isn't the stereotype of a woman, nor is she the antithesis of it. She fits right in some ways, and in others, she doesn't. Like any woman. There's a fantastic essay in Gender Euphoria written by Samara Jade Sendek, a trans woman who is a game narrative designer and writer. Her essay is titled Adrenaline Fix: Turning Masculine Pursuits into Feminine Identity, and it explores the euphoria she has found embracing her inner fighter. There's a passage where she shares how getting involved with training and martial arts brought her closer to herself and actually dimmed her body dysmorphia. The quote is as follows: "I like this part of me. Martial arts is seen as a masculine pursuit, same with things like brewing and wargaming. A fringe benefit of training early is that my dysmorphia, the part of me that says ew ew ew, get this misshapen tentacle off of me, went from discomforting to vague presence. My broad shoulders were battering rams, my thin hips were easier to grapple with. Nobody suspected my twiggy thighs had enough force to launch someone off of their feet." End quote. She says her inner little girl that watches everything she does is so loving, so patient. She watches without judgment, but will kick her feet and scream at the wrong things being taken away from her, because her inner child is in tune with her truest self and what makes her feel powerful and seen. I'd like to share some of the relevant quotes from the essay that I strung together. This isn't a complete paragraph, so if you're interested, please read the full essay in the book. I highly recommend it. Quote, "She didn't complain about the healthy parts of masculinity I took or the toxic parts I discarded. She's patient. She'll try anything once. When I took to femininity, she spoke up. When I painted my nails, did something nice with my hair, or worked with my artist friends on something, she noticed. Those things she approved of. She didn't care when I traded my soft pastel tops for boots and chains. She screamed when I thought of selling some old training equipment. It's my truth that I'm a fighter, that I carry scars from a less than ideal rearing, that lace and pastels aren't for me. What makes me a woman is my word. What makes me a fighter is my vocation, end quote. And if that doesn't echo Ladiva as a character, I don't know what does. Another thing about Ladiva that stands out to me is that I noticed, in Granblue Fantasy Versus at least, that she is never presented like a joke. I wondered at first if this was because of the English localization, but when I went digging online, I couldn't find anything I found offensive or insulting about the way she's portrayed in Japanese either. When I first encountered her in Versus, I got kinda anxious that I would have to brace myself for the same treatment Poison from Street Fighter got. In case you, my dear viewer, are blissfully unaware of that shit show, I gotta tell you about it. For context. So, Poison is a trans character that's infamous for being written and treated very transphobically by the developers. Legend goes that she was initially a cis woman, but was changed to be a trans woman for the English localization, because Japanese devs thought Western feminists would be mad that the player can beat up a woman. As if that doesn't happen in every fighting game ever. So, they made her a trans woman because they thought it would be less offensive to us because she's quote unquote not a real woman. I know, we're already off to a great start here. Heavy sarcasm, by the way. But this might not be the only reason, because in the original concept art predating that, she's referred to as a somewhat derogatory term for post-op trans women that I will put on screen, because I don't know if I should even say that term out loud. To make things even messier, yes, they get messier, she and her counterpart Roxy were actually completely edited out of the original 1989 game she debuted in Japan. And in the English localization, her and her partner in crime were both replaced with men. So the Western audience didn't even get to see Poison for a while. The Japanese devs keep changing their mind about if she's cis or trans, or even sometimes say it's entirely up to the region you play the game in and what version you receive. Regardless, they wrote a ton of transphobic lines into the game about her as a sort of in-joke. Examples of some of the transphobic jokes and lines are as follows. In 1999, SNK vs. Capcom Card Fighters Clash was released and included lines like "She's a man, baby," and also referred to her as a manager. The shitty manager pun was based off the fact that she was a pro wrestling manager in Street Fighter 3. In 2012, Street Fighter X Tekken's early footage showed that pretty much everyone's win quotes against Poison were transphobic. One of Ryu's win quotes was him accusing Poison of tricking men into sleeping with her, saying, "Your looks really can be deceiving. I'll be careful not to fall into your trap." Chun-Li's win quote against her was, "You're not very ladylike at all. I felt like I was fighting against a guy." Kuma's win quote regarding Poison was saying that she quote-unquote smells like a man, and lastly, Heihachi's quote was, "I don't know what you were before, but you didn't do bad for a woman." Don't ask me what any of these voices were, I know none of those characters sound like that. LGBTQIA+ advocacy groups reached out to Capcom letting them know this was unacceptable and transphobic, and they got rid of most of the lines. However, they kept in quite a few that were just hinting at her being trans without the insults. Despite constantly hinting at it, they are still flip-flopping about their stance on it and have never officially confirmed she is a trans woman. Back to my girl Ladiva, from everything I have seen, they haven't given her that treatment. From what I can see, they have stood strong that she is a trans woman from the start. And when I was hunting for sources confirming if there was anything transphobic about her character, the only thing I found was from what I believe is her character release bio in 2015. They say he or woman in one part of her bio that I translated with Google Translate. Hell, that could even be lost in translation. But the rest of her bio refers to her as a woman, and I couldn't find any evidence after the 2015 release of her bio that seems transphobically written. I could be missing something, but honestly, I hope not. Her voice lines that I could find even before the English localization were really endearing and genuinely sweet. They really touched my heart. I prefer her voice in English because Patrick Seitz did such a good job of really capturing that sweetness with less of the goofiness present in her Japanese dub. The Japanese dub for her kinda toes that line of maybe making her into a joke a little, but the writing of her lines isn't offensive in any way that I can slice, so I can forgive it.
When love meets passion, true beauty emerges. You're on the right path, and this duel will prove it!
ジュエルリゾートの花形デュエリスト、ファスティバよ。私の愛であなたを包んであげる。
The way I took it is that she's kind of just a goofy lady, honestly. I'm a goof. I kind of relate to her that way. When it comes to Ladiva, seeing her openly accept herself as a woman regardless of the attributes she was born with, it gives me strength. Ladiva is an exercise in gender euphoria. As a gender-fluid person, sometimes I strongly identify as a masculine person, and in these times I feel dysphoric and like a fraud. Like, I'm inherently too feminine, or temporarily inhabiting the wrong body. But she reminds me that I can internally challenge that narrative, look in the mirror, see whatever it is that I see, and find a way to feel secure in myself and my identity, as long as I can find the strength to love myself, no matter which way the pendulum swings. And speaking of love, that brings me to my final point. Love is Ladiva's religion. Girly is obsessed with love, and it's adorable. The lens in which she sees the world, including herself, is through the eyes of radical compassion. She looks in the mirror, self-love. She looks at others, love. Her original description in the first game she appeared in is, quote, "The real strength of this burly duelist comes not from her unrivaled brawn, but from her tender heart." She's just bursting with affection for all living things, and she never stops cherishing each and every creature within arm's reach. End quote. This is how she chooses to operate and view the world. She is present in the moment without judgment. Even when she's angry with those who mean harm and is totally about to beat their ass, she's gonna beat their ass with love and compassion and try to lead by example for those who are lost. And if there's a way to resolve the conflict without a fight, you better believe she's gonna take it. In the same scene where Cagliostro offers her an alchemical transition, the two of them are hunting a group of bad guys. Cagliostro is about to lay into them when Ladiva steps forward and says that beating their asses will just lead to them carrying more hatred in their heart, and that they'll go right back to doing what they did before. So instead, she gives them a speech about love so beautiful that the bad guys are brought to tears. They ask her why she is treating them so kindly despite their bad deeds, why she would try to remind them of all the good in the world and believe that they can be better. And she simply tells them that it's because of her undying commitment to love. Love is such a deep part of her ethos that instead of the badass names expected of a fighting game character's moves, her attacks are named things like Maximum Love Bomb, Magnanimous Heart, Feel the Love, and even one just called Heart. No, not fart, I said heart. It also says in her character bio for Granblue Fantasy Versus that, quote, she can get a bit worked up about love, but her friends consider that part of her charm. To her kind heart, everything is love. End quote. And personally, I think that's because they've seen that her approach often works. While it feels incredibly cliche to say, we live in a world with so many imposed thought patterns and deep-set beliefs that drive us towards hatred. Hatred of ourselves, which ultimately leads to hatred of others. And Ladiva is a great reminder to break the cycle, to be at peace with ourselves and others. There's a book by clinical psychologist Tara Brach titled Radical Compassion, Learning to Love Yourself and Your World with the Practice of RAIN, where she lays out the foundations of a system she created called, well, RAIN. It stands for Recognize, Allow, Investigate, Nurture. It's a tool she developed to help people practice mindfulness and radical compassion in equal measures. She was spurred on to write this book and to create RAIN itself because she read an article from a hospice worker that moved her. This worker had been there with thousands of people in their final moments in life. She listened to the thoughts of the dying for years, and one thread kept coming back over and over. She summed up their final thoughts as the following statement: I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself. Not long after this revelation in the first few pages, there was another passage that impacted me that I wanted to share. Quote, when I get stuck in painful emotions, it brings me to a repeating realization, an insight that has profoundly changed my life. I have to love myself into healing. The only path that can carry me home is the path of self-compassion. It doesn't matter if I'm caught in anger, fear of failing at something important, a sense of self-doubt, or loneliness. And it doesn't matter if I'm facing yet again challenges to physical mobility and well-being. The healing medicine always has some flavor of care, compassion, or forgiveness. On some level, I'm telling myself, please, be kind. This turning toward loving presence is the gateway to living true to ourselves. Radical compassion means including the vulnerability of this life, all life, in our heart. It means having the courage to love ourselves, each other, and our world. Radical compassion is rooted in mindful, embodied presence and is expressed actively through caring that includes all beings. End quote. Another clinical psychologist, Richard C. Schwartz, the creator of the internal family systems therapy technique, is also a proponent of radical compassion in his own way. Over the 40 years he spent building his highly effective evidence-based therapeutic model, he came to believe in what he calls inherent goodness. In his book titled No Bad Parts: Healing Trauma and Restoring Wholeness with the Internal Family Systems Model, he shares his thoughts as well as the thoughts of others who believe this is the direction we need to go in. Dr. Schwartz states that we can't make the necessary changes to improve ourselves and the world around us or redress the balance without making a new model of the mind. He shares that Daniel Christian Wall, an ecologist, was quoted saying the following: "Humanity is coming of age and needs a new story that is powerful and meaningful enough to galvanize global collaboration and guide a collective response to the converging crises we are facing." The them against us thinking that for too long has defined politics between nations, companies, and people is profoundly anachronistic. End quote. Dr. Schwartz says we need a new paradigm, something that convincingly demonstrates that humanity is inherently good and deeply connected to one another, rather than the pervasive global narrative that humans are inherently conflict-seeking, hateful, and sinful by default, the narrative that is breeding practically all conflict in our present world state. Ladiva as a character is an excellent study in not only how to live life boldly and authentically without apology, she is an exercise in how to live in a state of love, in the here and now, with love that extends to everyone, with a belief that people are better and can be better than when they stray from the path, if only we can show them how. If we view ourselves with love and kindness and accept and take care of ourselves, we can help love and take care of more people around us. Sure, it's not possible to constantly view everything and everyone through the eyes of love in every moment ever. After all, collective problems don't have singular solutions. But I think Ladiva knows this too. When she encounters the big bad guy of Fantasy Versus, Beelzebub, she doesn't try to hug it out. Instead, she says the following at the start of the battle.
You poor thing. Your love has been morphed, twisted. Well, I'll have to straighten you out myself.
Showing that sometimes force can be necessary to defend the innocent. And at the end of the battle, she says,
Did you know, sweetie? The most important thing in this big blue sky is unconditional love. A love that could save you might exist in this big blue sky, but whether you would accept it is another question entirely.
It's difficult to save someone who doesn't want to be saved. And because someone has to want to be better, to get better, sometimes there are people we cannot help. Like she said, there might be a love that could save him, but it isn't the place of the average person to handle. Most of us aren't really equipped for that. In cases like that, I propose we leave it to the professionals like Dr. Schwartz, who have devoted their lives to successfully rehabilitating people like that. For us, as the average person, the best we can do is practice radical compassion with ourselves and the people we are directly connected to in our day-to-day lives. There's a line Sendek says in her essay from Gender Euphoria that applies here. Empathy is punk in the day of the sardonic. There are times where different approaches are necessary, but Ladiva genuinely inspires me to operate from a place of love as often as possible. Radical compassion isn't always the answer, but if we could replace global narratives of human worthlessness and inherent evil, I strongly believe we could transform the world into one we're proud of. I'm mentally ill, and I personally have grappled with misanthropy a lot in my life. Not often toward individuals, but toward the terrible injustices humans are committing worldwide. It's hard not to feel like humans are awful, because sometimes we really are, collectively. I think that's unfortunately a fairly normal response when we look around us and see so much hatred and violence and unkindness proliferating everywhere. But what matters is that we check ourselves, understand that that part of us that enforces this message internally is only one part of us that serves a purpose: to protect us. What matters is that we make sure to act as often as possible from a place of love instead of a place of misery. Even if one part of our psyche is telling us to not even bother, we need to tell that part of ourselves that we see it, we understand it, we learn from it, and we love it. But this isn't the way forward. Sometimes it's an act of love to say goodbye to someone when you know you aren't right for each other. Sometimes it's an act of love to cancel social plans to relax and read a book instead. Sometimes it's an act of love to tell someone you're concerned for them and think they need help. And sometimes it's an act of love to look in the mirror, be honest with yourself, and acknowledge your worst qualities so you can begin to tackle these issues and become a better person. And sometimes, just sometimes, you gotta beat their ass like Ladiva. No, I'm kidding. Well, no, I'm just kidding. Mostly. What I am trying to say is that radical compassion and inherent goodness theory isn't toxic positivity. What it is acknowledging that acting from a place of love is sometimes messy, but it's always necessary to make our choices based in what we know to be good for ourselves and others, even if it's way harder than the easy way out. Being a warrior of love isn't all sunshine and rainbows. In fact, it can be a much harder path to walk than the more well-charted alternatives. And hey, speaking of rainbows, did you know Ladiva's theme song in Fantasy Versus is called No Rain, No Rainbow? If you didn't, now you do. I have firsthand seen how transformative radical compassion and inherent goodness theory can truly be. I've actually been doing Dr. Schwartz's internal family systems therapy for 3 years now, and I've made more progress in these 3 years than I have in the previous 12 years of therapy I've done. When I told my therapist this, they smiled and said that almost everyone they do IFS with swore the same thing. They had never seen so many people make this much headway until they started practicing IFS. I firmly believe in this method and think that previous methods didn't work for me because they didn't center love as its core philosophy, as well as the concept of learning to love every part of ourselves, even the worst parts. They all serve a function, even if they're dysfunctional. What is that function? We need to reach out to them and find out why they are here and understand that every part of us is trying its best to help, even when they're being hurtful. Too often, humans try to shove away the bad parts and then they fester. But if we work things out with them and appreciate them for trying their best, that's usually when they stop with the bad behavior. When I started seeing just how deep and profound this love-centric transformation has been, it reminded me of Ladiva and how she is such a proponent of the very thing that has changed my life for the better. And then I realized how important this seemingly silly on the surface wrestler babe is. Yes, she is a lighthearted feel-good character, but if you choose to look deeper, she carries such a crucial message. Hate is a cancer, love is the answer, baby. I feel like I've learned so much from her big ol' heart. And what a fantastic message to come from a trans character. Trans people, especially trans women, face so much hardship and hatred from others, but are often some of the kindest, coolest, and strongest people out there. If people driven by hate could only drop their preconceived notions of them and their identities and meet them as just that, people, they'd probably find they have so much they could learn, not to mention find new ways to love and be kinder to others. As my therapist reminds me when I fall down rabbit holes of anger and judgment towards people and the world, we don't have to like each other to be community. I'm going to leave you guys with a quote from Ladiva aimed at the player that genuinely brought a tear to my eye when I first read it. Maybe some of you out there need to hear this too. Quote, "I can't believe another year's already passed. You just keep getting more and more reliable. And it just so happens I have a request for Captain Reliable here. You're kind and considerate, which is why I know you're the type to take everything upon yourself. But that's actually very harmful. So if you ever find yourself in that kind of situation, you should toss off the shackles and ask others for help. You might think what you're doing is selfish or devoid of love, but you'd be surprised by the good that comes out of it. When you overwork yourself, all the love in your heart inevitably gets squeezed out. Never forget that we are all the same and born this way. That's all I ask of you, Captain. And that's it for today, fam. Thank you so much for watching. If you watched this all the way from start to finish and made it to the part where I ramble, you are a real one. I wanted to make sure I centered the voices of trans women in this one, so please give the featured people some love. I've linked them in the description box as always. I hope I didn't come across as too preachy in this one, but I felt it was a really important message to share. And also, a lot of people got a kick out of my Hypnos video where I kind of just shared why I love him and the impact he's had on me, but was also given constructive criticism that people wish the video were longer or more meaningful. So hopefully this scratches that itch. Do any of you play the Granblue games, and who is your main and why? My other main is actually Eustace. I have a big freaking crush on that dude, it's a problem. But I don't have any profound enough thoughts about his character to make into its own video. Like, if I made one, it would just be me blubbering about him incoherently, and no one wants to sit through that. Hell, I wouldn't even want to sit through writing, recording, and editing it. Also, why doesn't Ladiva have, like, any merch? Girly has, like, 0 merch. I want a figure of her, or even a keychain. Dude, I'd even settle for one of those silly booby mouse pads or something. Wait, that would actually be kind of iconic. If you enjoyed the video in any way, feel free to like and subscribe, but no pressure. We believe in free choice around here. If you're new here, hi, I'm DarkTeaTime, my pronouns are they, them, and I'm a purple sparkly goblin from the Sparkle Dimension. I do videos about asexuality, queerness, disability, and chronic illness through the lens of fiction and pop culture, so if that's your jam, I'd love for you to stick around and join the crew. We have a really great community here. Also, I'm gonna start streaming games on Twitch sometime this year, so if you want to come hang out with me and play indie horror games, please feel free to go follow me over there so you can be notified of when I go live. My Twitch username will be on screen, and I will link it in the description box below. If you feel so inclined, you can kindly tip me over on Ko-fi. I'm not monetized yet, so any support is greatly appreciated. Or Ko-fi, apparently it's pronounced Ko-fi, but their icon is a coffee cup, and it also says you can buy someone a coffee, so my brain just wants to call it coffee, so sorry about that. I also do sensitivity reading and consultancy over there as well, so if you'd like my input on a project you're working on, I'd be happy to help you out. Alright, ramble time over, folks. Take care, be nice to each other, and I'll see you on the flip side. DarkTeaTime out, and peace.